I'm now pleased to welcome our keynote speaker, and that is Bill Millar. Bill, I think you're retiring this year, correct? Has had a long, productive career in public transit. He started out, working as a transportation planner in Lancaster, PA. He then worked from 73 to 77 at the Pennsylvania DOT. When he went to Pittsburgh after that, he basically developed an award-winning access paratransit service. He's been very involved in paratransit, which is a key thing. Dr. Cooper and I are doing a paper on parataxis to try to make taxis part of the solution to save money for the public transit agencies. And we're hoping to hear your thoughts on how we can work together on that. We'd love to talk about reciprocity with APTA and introduction to the new leadership there, so that we can attend your conferences and hopefully you can send a representative to ours every year, because there's a lot of synergy, and our way to bridge the gap to have taxis have more respect is, in my opinion, paratransit, which is your expertise. So we're looking for your help on that. That's what brings us together. That's what got the approval by Dr. Mundy and Cooper of the Transportation Research Board new Taxi Studies Group. And that's really going to be the way we take IATR and what we do to the next level and into the broader transportation world. He then joined APTA, the American Public Transit Association, in 1996. He was there for 15 years after he served at 19 years at the Port Authority of Allegheny County. So you don't look that old. You've been around. You look great. He's done a fantastic job. We're hoping that despite his retirement, he's going to stay involved in some respect. He's on the executive committee of the Transportation Research Board. And, APTA really, Bill, is what we aspire to be like. A lot of good groups out there, but and anyone, when you get a chance, take a look at the APTA website. They have tons of staff, tons of studies, tons of policy reports. I don't know how many, you'll talk about it, but how many conferences you have a year. There's like 10, 20 conferences. Not to say that we're going to get there, but we should try to be like you and what you're doing, and there's no reason we shouldn't be working together. We thank you so much for coming. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Bill Millar.
Well, good afternoon. Oh, man. How can you be asleep after what he's going to have you do? Now, you can sleep when you're done, but how can you not feel good about that? I'm ready to buy a taxi company and join up. This was great stuff. Matt, thank you very much for that kind invitation. I hope you're having a better day than I am, having missed an airplane, fallen down an escalator, and a few other things so far today. But I didn't want to miss being with you, so we persevered for the whole thing, I guess. If you have any friends at the TSA, ask them why it takes an hour this morning to get through at Dulles, but that's neither here nor there. I heard the name Ray Monday. Where's Ray? There's Ray. Now, when I was a boy, I met Ray. He was at the transportation center. I mean, you're the one who said I looked young, or at least not too bad for my age. Ray, it's a pleasure to see you again. And pleased to see that you're involved in so many things and continue to be involved in so many. So that's good on that. As Matt said, I first met him just a few weeks ago. We were together in Buffalo, New York, at the New York State Public Transportation Association meeting. And it changed on its own. I'm getting nervous up here. And he said to me, gee, you believe in free speech, don't you? And I said, of course. And he said, well, then come to Toronto and give a free speech. So, I mean, that's basically how I got here today. So we'll see how it goes. I need to check the audience a little bit. It sounded like, from what Matt was saying, it's largely U.S. people. So let me start the other way. How many people not from the U.S. in the room here? Oh, wait, no wonder. You were talking to the wrong group. All right. And I'm going to assume a fairly hefty percentage of that is Canadian. So how many Canadians in the room? All right, okay, we get the ground rules, or at least know who my audience is today. Let me check a couple other names. Is Al Lagasse or anybody else from, there he is, hiding in the back corner. I got to watch my P's and Q's. He'll go back to the Beltway and report on me, I guess. So Al, nice to see you. How many years have you and I worked together? It's got to be 25, 30 if we count all the pre-days up and some of those stories that we won't talk about that. But anyhow, I'm glad to see that your Taxi and Paratransit and Limousine Association is here. They do a good job for you in Washington. I've enjoyed my relationship with Al and Hal Morgan and many others involved in that association. In fact, when I first began thinking about ways in which public transportation and taxi folks might work together on things, this actually was back in the 70s. In fact, it wasn't really until the 70s that the word paratransit even got invented. A little book that Ron Kirby and others collaborated on that published in the mid-70s that introduced us to that word. So we knew there was something out there, we just didn't know the way to describe it, and that word paratransit allowed us to do it. So very happy to see you, Al, and pleased that you're with us today. Well, let me just fill a couple of little blank spots in that resume that Matt went over for you. At the Port Authority of Allegheny County, which is the principal transit operator that serves Allegheny County, which is the county including the city of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania, there were lots of interesting things about it. One, it was the principal transit operator in the area. And so about 900 buses and a bunch of light rail cars and at the time streetcars and even a little commuter rail back in those days, not anymore, and something called inclined planes. Now, I don't know if you know what an inclined plane is. Anybody from San Francisco here? An inclined plane is a cable car not for sissies. I mean, it goes up really steep hills, 35, 40 degrees, that kind of thing is what it is. So an interesting place in which to do business. But like most cities in the world, and certainly most cities in the U.S., in the mid-70s, it was not a great place if you were a disabled person. It was very, very difficult to get around, and despite some pioneering efforts by one of the local taxi companies, as well as a number of nonprofits that were interested in that area, it was a tough place if you were in a wheelchair or had other infirmities that limited your mobility. And so what I was brought to do in Pittsburgh was to set up something that today is known as the Access Paratransit Service. So you're going to hear me several times through this speech talk very fondly of Pittsburgh and very fondly of the Access program. And part of the reason I think the Access program is important to talk about to this group is that unlike many places in the country, we decided to use existing transportation resources, which was by and large taxi operators in the Pittsburgh area. In fact, when we gave our first ride in 1979, we had 13 carriers, 13 operators involved, 10 of whom were private, for-profit taxi and paratransit companies, only 3 of whom, and they were very limited, they were like 5% of the rides and revenue that provided the rest of the service. So we'll get to that a little bit more later, but I wanted you to get some sense of my background in that regard. The other thing that was interesting about Port Authority from your perspective is that we were a regulatory body. The Public Utility Commission in Pennsylvania regulated taxi cabs, meaning exclusive ride taxi cabs, but everything else belonged to the Port Authority. As a result, it gave me an opportunity to begin to learn about the world of airport shuttle service, and my good friends at Airport Limousine in Pittsburgh and some companies like that. And it also meant that it gave us the right to incorporate paratransit service into our paratransit service. So that's a little background there. We'll get, you'll see why some of that may be important as we talk later on. Let me tell you a little more about APTA. And Matt, it was deja vu all over again as I sat here and listened to your plans for your organization. Because when I came to APTA some 15 years ago, I had been on our board before then, and we were undergoing considerable change, all with the same objectives that you had, of getting the organization to be better thought of, getting the organization to produce information that could be more useful to our members, definitely increasing our influence in legislative programs, both in the U.S. and Canada, and something near and dear to my heart, research. And you're going to hear me talk several times today about the Transit Cooperative Research Program, which is a cooperative effort of the Federal Transit Administration, the Transportation Research Board, and APTA. So a lot of those things in your statements rang true with me, and it seems to me that if you want to accomplish the objectives you state, those are the things you're going to have to do, and you have to do them all, folks. I mean, if you're a little tired from listening to his list and you think, I'll do number 1 and number 3 and number 18, that's not going to get you where you want to be. So just a little word of warning. Finally, to my friend from New Orleans, is that what I heard? You're from New Orleans? Well, I'm bringing you about 17,000 people at the end of this month. And while many of them will use the RTA's fine services, a lot of them are going to need your cab. So I want your card right after my speech here so I can do it. But anyhow, we are looking forward to coming back to New Orleans. You always treat us right, and we appreciate it. Well, let me tell you a little more about APTA. APTA is the principal trade organization that represents both the providers of public transportation as well as the supply industry. And I heard Matt use some words like associate member and things like that. We used to have those things. And then we began to realize that we are much stronger as a whole than as we are separate pieces. And so today we don't have associate members anymore. Instead, we have 1,550 organizational members that represent transit systems and companies that supply the transit industry, that represent over 500,000 direct jobs and some 1.9 million jobs in the U.S. and Canada. And we find when we go on the Hill that plays a little better than sounding like a group. But I'm not giving you any advice. I'm just telling you the scars that I learned over the years on that kind of thing. We were founded in 1882, so by North American standards, we're a pretty old trade organization. And from that very first meeting, which was held in Boston in 1882, we have had Canadian members. At that meeting, members from Montreal made the trip down to Boston, and that's indeed where we were born. In those days, our organization was made up of private sector companies that ran under public franchise that operated horse-drawn street railway cars. Well, lots changed since then, but some things haven't. At that very first meeting, if you go back and you read the annals of the first meeting in 1882, you knew they dealt with 3 great issues. And those issues were congestion, and fuel shortages, and pollution in 1882. Well, you'd think we would have solved those by now and we could have gone out of business, but as you know, those kinds of issues just changed. The congestion was too many horse-drawn street railway cars in the center of our great cities. And the fuel shortage was because of that congestion. How do you get the hay and the oats to the horses that were drawing those? And the pollution, well, leave it to your imagination. We were dealing with horses, as I recall. So very practical and humble beginnings in our organization. As time went by and electric streetcars came in and subsequently motor buses and all the other forms of urban public transportation, we've grown and grown. Until today, as I say, some 1,550